A lone human prisoner stood in the center of the grand imperial courtroom surrounded by towering reptilian judges, their golden scales reflecting the light from the ornate chandeliers above. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, a tradition of the Zalvoran Empire meant to signify the passing of judgment on the accused. The human James Carter was battered, bruised, yet his piercing blue eyes held no fear as he stared up at his captors. The Zalvoran High Chancellor Zyrak stepped forward, his voice a deep rumbling growl that resonated through the chamber. You stand accused of inciting rebellion against the Empire, defying the will of the Zalvoran and corrupting the minds of lesser species with your lies. How do you plead human? James smirked, his lips curling in amusement as he took a slow, deliberate step forward, the chains around his wrists clinking against the stone floor. You call it corruption, I call it freedom. A murmur spread through the assembled aliens, diplomats, military leaders, and nobles who had gathered to witness the human sentencing. Humans were a weak, primitive species in their eyes, yet this one stood defiant even in the face of certain death. Zyrak's eyes narrowed, his golden pupils flashing with contempt. Freedom is a myth, power is all that matters, and yet you, James Carter, a mere soldier from a species of insignificant creatures, have somehow managed to bring chaos to our empire. You will tell us how you did it before we erase your existence from history. James chuckled, his voice echoing off the chamber walls. It started with an idea, and as much as you'd like to believe power is everything, it's not. Ideas are far more dangerous than any weapon. The Chancellor's clawed hand clenched into a fist at his side. This human was mocking them, defying them even in shackles, and yet the rebellion on the outer colonies had spread faster than any Zalvoran strategist had predicted. Something about this species, their words, their actions, had ignited a flame among the subjugated worlds. James knew the weight of his words. He had been captured before he could see the rebellion through, but that didn't matter. He had already planted the seeds. Do you know why you fear us so much? James continued, his voice unwavering. It's because we don't break, not in the way you think. We don't bow to empires, we don't kneel before tyrants, and most importantly, we don't stop fighting even when the odds are against us. Zyrak slammed his clawed hand against the ornate podium. Enough, your words are meaningless. You will tell us the names of those who conspired with you, or you will suffer. James tilted his head, considering the demand before he smiled again. If you think pain will break me, you really don't understand humans at all. A flicker of uncertainty passed through the Chancellor's gaze. He had seen prisoners crumble under the Empire's interrogation techniques, but this human carried an unshakable resolve, as if he had already won despite his chains. Then let us see how long that arrogance lasts. Zyrak motioned to the guards. Take him to the dungeons, he will learn his place soon enough. As the guards moved to seize James, he exhaled slowly, meeting Zyrak's gaze one last time. You don't get it, do you? You've already lost. The doors of the courtroom slammed shut behind him as he was dragged away, leaving behind an eerie silence. The noble spectators exchanged uneasy glances, whispering amongst themselves, if one human could cause such disruption, what would happen if there were more like him? Far beyond the imperial palace, on distant worlds where the oppressed had begun to rise, James Carter's name had already become a legend, and no matter what the Zalvoran did to him, the spark he had ignited would only grow into an unstoppable wildfire. Deep within the dungeons of the Zalvoran capital, James Carter sat shackled to the cold metal wall, the dim glow of energy restraints casting eerie shadows across his bruised face. His breathing was steady despite the pain, his mind unshaken by the grim surroundings. Torture chambers lined the corridor, screams of other prisoners echoing through the metallic halls, but James remained silent, watching, waiting. The heavy doors at the end of the hall slid open with a hiss, and 3 towering Zalvoran guards entered, followed by a slender figure wrapped in deep crimson robes. Unlike the brutish guards, this one moved with precision, his piercing yellow eyes locked onto James with analytical coldness. So this is the infamous human, the interrogator mused, stepping closer. I expected something more impressive. James smirked, leaning his head back against the wall with a slow exhale. Sorry to disappoint, buddy, but I left my fireworks at home. The interrogator's gaze flickered with amusement for a brief second before his expression hardened. You think this is a game? You have no idea what is at stake. The Empire has existed for thousands of cycles. It has crushed species far stronger than yours, yet you humans continue to be an anomaly. He gestured, and the guards activated the energy restraints, sending a searing current through James's body. Muscles locked, breath stolen for an instant, but he refused to scream. You are alone, Carter, abandoned by your people, broken beneath the might of the Zalvoran Empire. Tell me who your allies are and I will ensure your suffering is brief. James chuckled, his voice strained but steady. If I'm alone, why are you so afraid? The interrogator's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on a small control device in his palm, but before he could respond, the distant sound of alarms blaring through the palace corridors interrupted the moment. The guards stiffened, exchanging wary glances before their comms crackled with a frantic message. Prison breach, multiple entry points, unidentified forces attacking. James allowed himself a small grin as he rolled his shoulders against the restraints. Right on time. The interrogator's glare darkened as he leaned in. You planned this, didn't you? James met his gaze unwaveringly. I told you the moment you put me in chains you lost. The walls trembled as distant explosions rocked the dungeon doors. The Zalvoran forces scrambled to respond, but confusion reigned through the dimly lit corridor. Flashes of movement appeared, distant figures cutting down guards with lethal precision. The rebellion had arrived. The interrogator snarled and raised the control device to activate another wave of pain, but before he could press it, a sudden blast tore through the entrance door, sending metal fragments flying. A shadow moved through the smoke, a familiar voice ringing out. We're taking him back. James exhaled a slow, relieved breath as his restraints powered down, collapsing to the ground. Four strong hands pulled him up. Humans stood before him, armor-scarred, weapons hot from battle. They weren't just rebels, they were soldiers, fellow survivors. A soldier helped James to his feet, a woman with sharp eyes and a scar along her jaw. You held up your end of the deal, now let's get the hell out of here. James grinned despite the pain. Thought you'd never show up. As chaos erupted around them, the Zalvoran interrogator watched his prisoner disappear into the battle, vanishing like a ghost through the flames. He clenched his fists, realizing too late what had happened. The human hadn't just survived. He had won. James sprinted through the crumbling corridors of the Zalvoran palace alongside the rebel strike team. Blaster fire scorching the air around them. Alarms wailed throughout the complex as security forces scrambled to contain the breach, but the rebels moved with precision, cutting down Zalvoran guards before they could regroup. How the hell did you even get in here? James shouted over the chaos as he ducked behind cover, returning fire with a stolen plasma pistol. The woman beside him grinned. Sarah Voss, ex-Special Forces and one of the rebellion's top operatives. You left us breadcrumbs, your capture, your trial, all of it gave us exactly what we needed to pinpoint this place. James smirked. Guess I do make a good bait. Sarah chuckled. Just don't die before we get you out of here. The team pushed forward, carving a path through the Imperial stronghold. The Zalvoran were powerful warriors, but their arrogance had left them unprepared for an attack inside their own capital. They had never imagined that anyone would dare invade their heartland. James knew better. The moment they reached the outer walls, an armored dropship swooped in, its engines roaring as it hovered above the burning palace. Its side doors slid open, revealing more human fighters providing covering fire as the team scrambled onto the boarding ramp. As James pulled himself aboard, he turned back to see the Zalvoran High Chancellor Zyrak standing on a distant balcony, his golden eyes locked onto the escaping rebels. Even from afar, James could see the fury in them. The dropship's pilot, a grizzled veteran named Cole, glanced back with a smirk. Welcome back to the fight, Carter. James exhaled deeply, taking a seat against the bulkhead. Not sure I ever left. The ship veered upward, dodging incoming fire as it broke through the planet's upper atmosphere. James looked out at the stars, the vast emptiness stretching before them. A war was brewing, one bigger than anything the Zalvoran had faced before, and he had just become its symbol. Sarah took a seat beside him, passing him a ration pack. You really pissed them off back there. James tore it open and took a bite, his eyes still locked on the fading planet below. Good, that means they're scared. The rebel fleet drifted in the darkness of space, hidden within the shadow of a dying star. James stood on the bridge of the command vessel, watching as damaged ships were patched up and survivors from the prison raid received medical attention. The battle at the Zalvoran capital had been a success, but it was only the beginning. Sarah stepped up beside him, arms crossed. They'll be coming for us now. James nodded. They were coming for us the moment we fought back. Now they'll just be angrier about it. Cole leaned against the control console, smirking. Angry lizards make mistakes, we just have to be ready to use that against them. James studied the holomap of the surrounding star systems. The rebellion was growing, but it wasn't strong enough yet. The Zalvoran controlled entire sectors, their fleets outnumbered the rebels 1,000 to 1. A direct fight was suicide. We don't win by fighting them where they expect us, James said, tracing a path along the outer colonies. We hit them where it hurts: supply lines, production centers, communication hubs. We don't fight a war, we make them bleed until they collapse. Sarah smirked. Sounds like you've been thinking about this for a while. James exhaled. The moment I saw what they did to those occupied worlds, I knew we had to end this empire. A soft chime interrupted them. The ship's communications officer turned from his console. We're getting a transmission from one of our deep cover agents in Zalvoran space. They say they have something critical and they're requesting immediate extraction. James exchanged a look with Sarah. If we've got someone inside the Empire feeding us intel, we can't ignore that. Cole frowned. But it's a trap, you know that, right? James nodded. Doesn't mean we don't spring it. Sarah grinned. Guess we're not done pissing them off yet. The fleet began to move, engines burning as they set course for their next mission. James knew the Zalvoran would be waiting, but that was fine. Let them wait, let them think they had the upper hand, because this war wasn't about strength. It was about who could outlast the other, and humans never broke. The rebel strike team gathered in the dimly lit hangar of their stolen freighter, a sleek, unassuming vessel that wouldn't draw attention in Zalvoran-controlled space. James adjusted the straps on his tactical vest, checking his weapon as Sarah approached, her expression sharp with focus. Insertion point is a cargo station orbiting Keleth Prime, she said. Our contact is using the alias Varen. They'll be waiting in docking bay 17, but if they've been compromised, expect a trap. James smirked. I always expect a trap. Cole grunted from the pilot's seat as he prepped the ship for launch. Good, because this one's got all the makings of a royal-grade execution. The freighter slipped into FTL, the hum of the engines vibrating beneath their boots as they neared the Zalvoran-controlled system. The ship's ID scrambler activated, disguising them as a standard merchant vessel. They dropped out of FTL into the bustling lanes of cargo ships and patrol vessels surrounding Keleth Prime. Docking clearance granted, came the automated reply from the station. The rebels exchanged glances before Sarah spoke into her comm. All right, stay sharp. We go in quiet, we come out fast. The freighter docked with a metallic thud. James led the way down the ramp, scanning the hangar. The air was thick with the scent of burning fuel and coolant. Massive cargo loaders drifting between towering stacks of crates. Among the workers and dock officers, a single figure stood alone, wearing a hooded cloak. Varen, James called out, watching as the figure turned, revealing the pale features of an Avicien, an avian-like species known for their intelligence and neutrality. Varen's golden eyes flicked to James, then to the surrounding area. We have little time, the informant said, voice calm but urgent. The Empire is moving against the rebellion in ways you don't yet understand. I have proof, but we must leave now. James motioned for Sarah to cover their exit as they moved back toward the freighter, but just as they neared the boarding ramp, the overhead lights flickered and died, replaced by flashing red alarms. A cold voice echoed through the station's speakers. James Carter of Earth, surrender now, and your death will be swift. James sighed, glancing at Sarah. He muttered, yep, definitely a trap. Zalvoran soldiers poured into the hangar, weapons raised, blocking every exit. The leader of the squad, a towering warrior clad in ornate battle armor, stepped forward, his reptilian eyes gleaming with malice. The infamous human rebel, I was beginning to think you wouldn't show. James smirked. Sorry to keep you waiting. The Zalvoran commander bared his teeth in a vicious grin. You should have run while you had the chance. Now you will die, as all defiant creatures do, crushed beneath the Empire's heel. James exhaled, slowly gripping his weapon tighter. Yeah, see, that's the thing about humans, we don't do well with leashes. With that he moved first, pulling the trigger as the hangar erupted into chaos. The hangar exploded into a storm of gunfire as James and his team fought their way through the Zalvoran soldiers. The rebel strike team moved with practiced precision. Sarah and Cole flanked James, providing cover as they made their way toward the freighter. The Zalvoran were fierce warriors, but they had underestimated the human resolve. James ducked behind a stack of crates as a volley of plasma shots sizzled past his head. He grinned, pulling a grenade from his belt and tossing it toward a cluster of Zalvoran soldiers. A deafening blast, followed by a cloud of smoke, left a trail of carnage. You think they'll just let us walk out of here? Sarah shouted over the fire exchange. James shot a look at her as he fired at a group of advancing soldiers. They never do, but we can make them regret it. The commander's voice echoed through the station's loudspeakers once again, now tinged with fury. Your lives mean nothing to the Empire. Surrender now or perish where you stand. James rolled his eyes as he ducked behind another stack of crates. The same old line. Cole's voice crackled over the comms. We've got incoming reinforcements. They've locked down every exit. Get to the ship now. Got it, James said as he signaled to Sarah. They pushed forward, making their way toward the freighter with soldiers closing in on both sides. Varen, the informant, had disappeared into the shadows once the shooting started, and James could only hope the Avicien had a plan to get them out. He didn't have time to think about that now. His priority was survival. As they neared the freighter's loading ramp, James turned to see a group of Zalvoran soldiers rushing toward them from the far side of the hangar. He cursed under his breath. They're coming in from both sides, Sarah said, her eyes scanning the room. James looked around quickly, spotting a nearby maintenance door. He motioned for the team to follow, and they sprinted toward it, a hail of blaster fire trailing them as they ran. They reached the door just as the Zalvoran soldiers rounded the corner. James shoved the control panel with a savage punch and the door slid open with a mechanical hiss. The maintenance tunnel was narrow, but it led directly into the lower levels of the station where they could re-enter the freighter from a concealed access point. They moved quickly through the darkened hallways, the sounds of battle fading behind them. "We've lost them for now," James said breathlessly as they reached the access hatch. The team quickly entered the freighter and sealed the door behind them. Cole fired up the engines. The hum of the ship's power systems coming to life. "We're clear to launch, Captain." James took a seat at the comms console, his mind already racing ahead. "They've got their hands on something important," Varen said. "So what's it gonna be?" Sarah gripped the armrest, her expression dark. "We don't have time to analyze this now, we just need to get out of here." James nodded. "You're right, but we can't run forever. We need to hit them back before they hit us first." The freighter's engines roared to life as the ship shot out of the station's docking bay, narrowly avoiding a barrage of anti-ship fire from the station's defenses. The stars beckoned beyond the space station as the ship plunged into hyperspace, leaving the chaos of the battle behind. But even as they fled, the weight of what they had uncovered settled over James. The Zalvoran were planning something bigger than a simple retaliation. They had been collecting resources, building forces. The war had only just begun. The rebel fleet gathered in the void of space, far from the Zalvoran Empire's reach, but not far enough to escape the looming threat of retaliation. James stood before the holographic display on the command deck, his eyes scanning the various reports coming in from scouts, spies, and allies. Their network was growing, but so was the power of the Zalvoran. Time was running out. Sarah stood beside him, arms crossed, as she studied the same data. "They're massing forces at the border worlds. If we don't strike soon, they'll be too powerful to stop." James exhaled, his fingers drumming lightly on the console. "We know they're planning something big. The intel Varen gave us is more than just about weapons. They're gathering artifacts, technology from ancient civilizations. Something far beyond their current capabilities. And they're preparing to unleash it." Cole's voice crackled over the comms, his tone grim. "If they get their hands on whatever it is, they'll wipe us out before we even know what hit us. We've got to move now, or it'll be too late." James nodded. "I agree. But we can't just rush in blindly. We need to hit them where it hurts the most. Their supply lines, their communication hubs, and their leadership." A map of the Zalvoran-controlled systems projected in front of him. He zoomed in on a specific sector, a heavily fortified planet known as Zalvor, the heart of the Empire's military command. "It's time we put an end to their leadership," James said, his voice low and determined. "We'll strike at their capital. Disrupt their command structure, take out their military leaders, and show them what happens when they mess with humanity." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this? Going for their capital is a bold move." "It's not just bold," James replied, a fire igniting in his eyes. "It's necessary. We cripple them now, and they won't be able to regroup. We take out their leaders, and we stop their plans in their tracks." Cole's voice was filled with quiet admiration. "You really think we can pull this off?" "We have no choice," James said firmly. "We're all in on this. If we don't strike at Zalvor, they'll hit back harder than we can handle." The crew exchanged determined glances. They had been through hell and back, but this would be their greatest challenge yet. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about changing the course of history. As the fleet began to make preparations, James stood for a moment in silence, thinking of all the lives that had been lost to the Zalvoran, the worlds that had been crushed beneath their boots. He thought of the countless people who had been enslaved, who had been waiting for someone to fight for them. He wasn't just fighting for the rebellion anymore. He was fighting for all of humanity. "Let's end this," he muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. The rebel fleet moved into position, preparing for the assault on Zalvor. The entire galaxy would be watching. This was the moment of truth, the tipping point that would determine the future of the war, and the future of the empire that had threatened to crush them all. James looked to his crew, his heart steady, knowing that whatever happened next, they had already won. The Zalvoran had underestimated humanity once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. And when the dust settled, they would know one thing for sure: the human spirit was unstoppable.